Probate is the court process that determines where your assets go after you pass away. The first step is that we have to identify all the legal heirs of the person who passed away, and we have to have all those heirs sign off on the initial petition to probate the estate. And then we have to have the proposed executor sworn in by the probate court. It takes generally a couple months for the judge to approve the probate petition. After that, we have to publish notice in the newspaper for 4 consecutive weeks, which opens up a 4-month window for creditors to come forward. We have to file inventories and accountings. We have to allow anyone to come forward and contest the will. We have to allow creditors to come forward and make a claim on the estate. And then eventually we can start distributing assets to your heirs. Now, if you don't have a will, we still go through the probate process, but we do what's called the intestate process. So the state has a family tree that they use to decide who gets your assets. So if you're married and you have 2 children, you might assume that everything would go to your spouse, but your spouse would get a third and each of your children would get a third. It's really not ideal. It's especially not ideal if you're on your second marriage, because then your current spouse gets a third and your children each get a third. What happens a lot of times in that situation is that your children can force your spouse to sell the house so they can get their money out of the estate. So it's not really a situation you want to put your family in. You might hear from a lot of attorneys that probate in Georgia is not really that big of a deal. And sometimes it's not, but for a lot of people, it's a very big deal because your assets can be frozen for years. It can cost tens of thousands of dollars in attorney's fees, and it can tear your family apart. So the best option that you have as far as probate is to avoid it. The average probate in Georgia takes about 12 months on average, and in the metro Atlanta area, it typically takes a little bit longer because we have a very large population and the judges have to deal with everything that comes through their court, so it takes a long time for them to get things approved. Probate can also be pretty expensive because we don't really have set attorney's fees in Georgia. So a lot of states have a fixed cost for attorney's fees where they just charge a percentage of the estate. In Georgia, we have something called a reasonableness standard, which means that attorneys can charge whatever they want as long as the court considers it reasonable. So we charge hourly for probates. It's usually somewhere around $300 an hour for out-of-court preparation, and then somewhere around $400 an hour for actual court time. You can avoid probate basically 2 ways. You can either have no assets when you die, or you can put your assets in a living trust, because assets inside a living trust are not part of your probate estate, so when you pass away, those don't have to go through probate. You shouldn't try to handle a probate proceeding without legal assistance because you will be held to the same standard that an attorney would be, and you probably don't know the process to go through. There are a lot of little steps along the way that you need to take in order to have the process go smoothly, but a lot of people will start the probate, they get letters of administration or letters testamentary, and they assume that's the end of the process. And then they start spending money out of that account, and then eventually they have to go back before the judge and explain why all of that happened. Our firm is different from other firms who handle probate because we try to simplify things as much as possible. There are unscrupulous attorneys who are just looking to fill out billable hours, and they will take the longest route that they can through the probate process. We have a lot of experience with probate at our law firm. We've dealt with a lot of clients who have had to go through the probate process because a loved one passed away, and we've walked them all through the process as simply as we possibly can. During your initial consultation, we'll gather some information from you and try to see if a probate is necessary, and if probate is necessary, how we can help you. And then we'll get started with the petition to open the probate.